Stephen Smith of Kitman Labs is with us in studio. Stephen, good morning to you.
Thanks, Ger.
This is one of those stories that we cover a bit from time to time about how well some of the Irish companies involved in the science of sport are doing around the world. We've spoken before about it, but just to give a quick recap of what Kitman do, maybe to explain people who are coming just to the story now.
Yeah, so we're a data science and analytics company. Essentially, we work with professional sports teams all over the globe, and we consume all of the data essentially from all of the medical areas, from the performance areas, and then all of the other data collected about athletes. And we perform data analysis services, trying to help them to understand how do they optimize performance, how do they keep their athletes healthy, and how do they help their teams to win.
Okay, so it's it's an ongoing thing that can help predict future outcomes, to prevent injury, but also to kind of show that you're working well here but not so well in other areas.
Exactly. I mean, listen, if you think about what's going on this week with, in Leinster and the preparations for this weekend, I mean, at some point in time, all of that team, that backroom team, would have to sit down and understand, well, what does the training week actually look like this week? How do they ensure that they get the right drills? How do they ensure that they spend the right amount of time? How do they ensure that they recover their athletes appropriately? And there's a huge number of factors that play into that, the tactics and strategy they want to deploy, but also how do they ensure that they don't overwork their athletes so that they're fatigued going into the game this weekend, and how do they ensure that they actually don't underwork them and actually they don't have enough stimulation, so by the time they get to the game that they actually don't perform well.
In the past, that would have been a coach going, yeah, he looks good, yeah, ooh, he's looking a bit undercooked, need to get him out there. Exactly. Obviously not very scientific.
It was a coach's eye and it was a gut, and I think that's still happening all over the globe today. But there's a significant amount of work now happening, and there's very forward-thinking and innovative teams who are now leveraging technology that we have built to now help them to actually make that decision. And by no means does that rule out the coach's gut or experience, like they have that, but this helps them to validate and invalidate some of the thoughts that they've had, and then really fine-tune those decisions.
How does your technology actually work? What kind of markers are you gathering? What information do you get?
Everything. So it depends on the team, but they're collecting GPS data, accelerometry data, so they collect all the distance of what the athletes run, changes of direction, collisions. We'll take all of the performance tracking data from the game, so we know tackling, passing, we know about how they're sleeping, we know about how stressed they are, we know about how they move and range of motion around joints and what their movement patterns actually look like. And then all of that information is basically combined to identify outliers or traits that might tell us about when they might break or about decrements that may occur in performance because of what's happening.
Okay, so if a new team comes to you and says, what can you do for us? How quickly can you establish baselines to say, well, this player suddenly has an outlier, either good or bad?
Yeah, so it depends on a team, but realistically now, the kind of big data revolution in sport has kind of taken hold. Teams have been collecting data for years. So for example, I was talking to a North American team yesterday. They sent us over 2 years worth of data that they already collected, but they just didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
And we took that, ran analysis on it, and we built them back a report, and we had a conversation yesterday. And we were able to showcase that over 40% of injuries that occurred, we actually were able to identify through the models that we had built for them, and could have actually identified and prevented those from happening.
What type of injuries are you talking about?
Essentially, we're talking about hamstring injuries, cruciate ligament injuries, ankle sprains, even there was some shoulder injuries. So it depends on the sport, but essentially what we do is we take the injury event, so as that's been stored in the medical record, and we look at all the patterns of all of the data and what's actually happened in the build-up to that injury. And the system basically just models multiples and multiples of those together to understand what happens when all of these occur, and then we produce back the insights to coaches.
Okay, so predictive in terms of the future, that team starts to work with you and you'll be able to say there's a reasonable chance that this player is in line to suffer a cruciate injury or a shoulder injury because they're stressed in these particular areas.
Absolutely, and the technology's even got to the point now where we can tell them exactly how much risk. So instead of just saying this guy might be at risk, what we can say is, well, 42% of the time previously when this happened, people had this injury. That is phenomenal, ability now to be able to get to that and say, well, 42% is probably high, but if their risk has increased, but maybe it's got to 4 or 5%, there's certain weeks where you probably just have to take that risk.
Yeah.
A big week like this, you absolutely would.
Presumably there can often be kind of a struggle with buy-in, and you just kind of alluded to it there a little bit, that if you say to somebody, this guy's got a huge percentage chance of a shoulder injury should a heavy impact come on that shoulder, presumably there's people who not only would want to take that risk, but people who say, this is nonsense, I mean, I don't believe what this is saying, how can you predict a shoulder injury?
Absolutely, but I mean, if you think about when I was first in rugby and first in professional sport, what would always happen was we would collect all of the data, and I think we were the first Northern Hemisphere team to actually use GPS technology in Leinster back in 2008, and of any sport, and we would collect the data and we would basically look at changes in terms of what would actually happen. So we would see a guy had ran more distance, or he's had more accelerations or more decelerations, and we always associated change or like an increase in volume or distance or intensity with an increase in risk, but that's not actually true, and that's why I think there has been a struggle with buy-in in sports science globally, because coaches would look at that and like sports scientists would be coming and saying, hey, he's done more, we need to pull him back, that's dangerous. We didn't know if it was dangerous, but by what we've actually done, by linking it with actual events, it's not our opinion. We're not coming saying that, we're saying, well, 50% of the time previously when that happened, this is the outcome. Do what you want with it, and like coaches obviously have the final call, but our job as sports scientists is to arm them with facts and give them facts, not opinions, and allow them to actually use that as part of their decision-making process.
Because it seems that there's like quite often there might be a long way to go in this as well, that I'm not sure what you've seen in terms of the different teams you've worked with, but the one example that always comes to me in terms of injuries that could be predicted is with a club like Arsenal or something like that, and there's been a lot of commentators around that club, and people can say, even with their own eyes watching Match of the Day every Saturday, it's like that guy's due an injury and lo and behold it happens. Aaron Ramsey has done his hamstring yet again or something like that. Is there a frustration on your part that a lot of clubs haven't bought in, or am I wrong? Like maybe Arsenal are buying into this sort of thing?
No, there's a huge frustration on our part that that certain teams haven't bought in, but that's part of the process for us, is that we have to prove this as well. This is a new concept, like you've just said. People look at it and go, that can't be possible. How would you do that? So it's our job not only to build a technology that can do this, but also to educate the market and help them to understand that this is possible. This truly is possible. This is not a pipe dream. This is not somebody saying, hey, we have a secret formula or we have an algorithm essentially to do this. That's not how this works. We have built essentially research techniques and research products that allow you to collect all of your data, link it back with actual events, and see what has happened. That's a very different process than saying we have a secret formula that will solve all of your problems.
Yeah, in a way, having the secret formula is something that makes your business easier to protect. So now you're entering a phase where it's about reputation and it's about relationships, and that's the kind of hardest part for a business to grow in some ways.
Yeah, it is, and I think like the last time we were in here chatting, I think we were working with like 35 teams, and we were in that stage as a business that we were like, we're really hoping that we can do this, and we were talking about building this technology, and now we're at the point we work with more than 150 teams globally. I think our product is in like 29 different languages. We have like people using it like in Japanese. Like it's phenomenal to see it, and we're at the point now where this is not us talking about, well, maybe this will be possible. Hopefully, if we build this technology, it will work. It's working. Like we had an NFL team that saved themselves or reduced the number of days lost by over 1,000 days last year. They had
Quite a lot.
63% reduction in that sport it is, and they actually made the playoffs for the first time in 17 years, which was phenomenal for their organization. We had a Major League Soccer team that reduced their days lost.
The Jaguars? I'm trying to work it out.
It was the Bills, correct, yeah. Right. We had a Major League Soccer team who went from last in their conference to fourth and actually made the playoffs and reduced their injury profile by about 70% last year. We had a Premier League team that reduced their injuries by about 40%, a Super Rugby team that reduced them by nearly 50%. Like, it's happening all over the globe in multiples of sports now. Like, it's pretty amazing. And I think for us, the next step is even more exciting. Like we've just released some really cool technology linking this data back with performance outcomes. So the holy grail for all of us in sport was not just, okay, well, can we make them healthier, but like we're hired as sports scientists or as practitioners in sport to help teams to win. Like for Leinster and all the staff in there, the only thing that counts this year, the only thing they're judged on is whether they win on Saturday. And we've always wanted to get to that point, but we wanted to bite everything off in small chunks. And now we've actually started to develop technology that takes all of the same data and it links it back with performance outcomes. So what improves passing accuracy, what improves scrum effectiveness, what improves like all of those key performance indicators for them. And then how do we optimize what we do in training to ensure that we get to that right outcome.
So it's not just now about injury prevention, it's about improving the quality of every activity that they're involved in.
Exactly. I mean, like that's the holy grail, that intersection of how do we make our athletes better and how do we actually keep them healthy, because that's what coaches are trying to do. We believe that by training people and giving them that stimulus that actually we're making them better. But we have to do that in a safe environment, because if we break them, they can't win. And Arsenal are living proof of that. Spurs, I think, even over the last couple of years, Spurs have been so close to winning the Premier League. And then there's been a couple of key injuries that have occurred to them. So being able to now grab all of the same data that they're already working hard to collect and then taking that information and then linking it back to key performance outcomes and helping them to suggest that, well, this is what training on a Monday should look like this week, this is what it should look like on a Tuesday, and then being able to adapt that day to day, seeing how the players are reacting and responding to ensure that by the time Saturday comes, that they actually go out there and nail it. It's phenomenal.
There's a couple of things that kind of spring to mind there. Like when you mentioned the Bills there, I'd say last season, I don't have the figures, but last season was probably the biggest bloodbath in NFL history. They actually had a Sports Illustrated cover of all the injured players going into the postseason. And also when you mentioned the rugby, you think of Argentina in 2015 and the bloodbath that was the France game before that. Yeah. I think France is a bit of an outlier because that was just such an intense game. But with the NFL, are you seeing things there that the likes of the Carson Wentz's, the Aaron Rodgers, all those injuries could have been prevented to a certain, not all of them, obviously, but there was a section of them that it didn't need to be as bad as it turned out to be?
Listen, I think the technology is proving that we can do this in any field. And we're seeing both big changes in both contact and non-contact injuries, which will shock people. So most people think, well, it's a contact-related injury, there's nothing we can do about it. But actually, there's huge amounts of science suggesting that essentially when you have increases in stress or increases in like fatigue, that you have like a decrease in peripheral vision and peripheral narrowing. You have decreases in coordination and reaction times. So when you slow all of those things down and you get into those really high-paced like scenarios, obviously your decision-making is going to be different. So we're actually seeing that through some of the insights we're developing that actually contact injuries and non-contact injuries are actually reducing. Like that's a huge step forward for the industry, I believe. And I think to your point, absolutely there's something that can be done, and it was a bloodbath in the NFL. The majority of teams had an increase in injuries. The fact that the Bills had a decrease in injuries, like I think is testament to the amazing work that their staff are doing within that environment.
It's also famously a copycat league that as soon as the analytics started to get into the NFL in terms of performance, everybody's like, ooh, I need a little bit of this analytics. What are you guys doing over there? So like as soon as the story about the Bills begins to get out, presumably everybody else in the NFL is like, what are you guys doing? How do I get a bit of that?
Yeah, well, we're hoping so. That's the idea. But listen, we want that to happen globally, and we don't want it just to be in the elite sports space. Like we're seeing, you know, the potential for what we're doing is it's not about actually understanding elite athletes, and we talked about this a little bit the last time I was here too, but it's about understanding human beings and how human beings respond. And I think when we last chatted, we talked about the fact that, hey, there's potential actually for this to touch everybody, but it was kind of like, hopefully, at some point. But now we're seeing, like, with the advancement in technology and with, like, I think Apple over the last 2 years acquired an electronic medical record sharing company. And now, like, within the US anyway, you can have your medical records on your phone. So, like, you can tap into your electronic medical records. That's a really, really transformative moment within the industry, because now all of a sudden we have the same data sets that elite athletes have. Because they have like their doctors and physios actually documenting the information in our system. Well, now actually you have it on your personal device. That means that, okay, well, what you're collecting through your Fitbit, your Apple Watch, you know, your Jawbone, your Shine, all of this information in exactly the same way it happens in sports can actually be done for you and I. And I think that's a phenomenal step forward, because if you look at you know, what's happened across like the world of digital health over the last 10 years, Fitbit became like $1 billion company, and it basically told you how many steps you took.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty embarrassing. Like, I mean, that was the same challenge we got to in professional sport, in that we started getting this GPS data, and now we had all of this, and we were like,
so what?
Yeah, exactly. So what? We know that they ran 5K yesterday. We know they had 200 accelerations. What does that mean? How does that impact us? But the potential within that world of digital health to help people to understand, when you open up your Map My Run or your Strava or your Runtastic, to be able to help people to understand, well, this is how I get faster. This is how I improve my 10K time. This is how I do that in a healthy way. This is how the poor night's sleep I had last night impacted me, and this is how my program should change. That is, like, for human beings, I think that is an enormous step forward, and it's something that we are really, really excited about bringing our technology to that
because
sphere.
It makes everybody healthier by saying, this training session you're going to do today is only 20 minutes. You don't need to do a full hour's run. Actually, if you do a full hour's run, more than likely you're going to be injured, and you won't be able to do any more training for the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, or maybe it's actually that you should do more running. You know, it's not always, I think we always have this idea in our head that it's always about doing less. But actually what we're seeing with the majority of teams is that actually doing more is better, because what's happened is they've gone from the point within the industry of having a stopwatch and a whistle. So all we had was like time to understand how much work are people doing.
Yeah.
So now we have like 300 tools to understand what they're doing. So we see more variation, we see more outliers, and then we say, okay, well, I have more tools to make decisions with, so I'm making more decisions. So actually what's happening is we're wrapping our athletes up in cotton wool and holding them back. So actually what we're finding is that the most important thing about what we're doing is eliminate all of the data that tells us nothing, and isolate it back to the very core pieces of data that can actually help us to move forward. But like, I just think if somebody has bought an Apple Watch, has bought a Fitbit, something like this, they've put their hands up and said, I want help.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be fitter, I want to be healthier, I want to lose weight. And if we don't give them the tools to do that in a safe and effective manner, or if we don't give them the tools to make sure they get to that end point, like if you do buy a Fitbit and you want to lose weight, and 3 months later you haven't lost any weight, you're going to lose your motivation. You're probably going to drop out and fall away from that.
Yeah.
So by giving them the tools to actually understand, well, how do I lose that weight? What do other people that are the same age as me look like? How do they train? What does that look like? How do I do that? How can I do that effectively? That's a really, really exciting opportunity. I think the value that we can bring to people to help them understand how do they control their healthcare journey, I think that's exciting.
How far away are you from that consumer product?
Not very far at all. So the technology is there and is capable of doing it. Now it's about essentially the difference within that environment today is that we provide the insights back to professional practitioners today. So strength and conditioning coaches, doctors, physios, because that's the environment in a professional team. But you know, if it's you or I, we don't have those services around us. So what we're doing at the moment essentially is building like a smart coaching layer that will actually deliver not just back, this is what the information is showing us, but actually helps us to understand what do I do next? And how does that change and augment day to day? And that's some of the biggest projects we have ongoing is that right now. And we have some partners that we're working with alongside that to actually understand, well, as soon as we get this ready, how do we actually get this into millions of people's hands?
Yeah. So that smart coaching layer, will that be an augmented reality thing? Will that be human beings? How would that work?
So there's a couple of different ideas, right? Really cool ideas around it. So generally you can push that information back through technology, but like there's really big brands around the world that have audience just through digital health already, and they have like big endorsements and sponsorships with certain athletes that could be delivered back through like a coach that actually is like a professional athlete that you look up to. It's not actually them, but it actually looks like them actually speaking to you. So there's different methods of like engaging people through that we think are really exciting and that can be utilized to really make it feel real.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. That you sign up, suddenly LeBron is saying, "Well, I think you're not working enough there." Kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Slap you in the ass with his tail.
If you want to throw the buzzer beater down, this is what you got to do.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a pretty revolutionary couple of years you've been through then over the last while.
Yeah, it's been incredible. Listen, it's the journey so far has been pretty amazing for us as an organisation, and certainly for me as a professional. And to see the things that we thought about and talked about 10 years ago now starting to come to fruition and get into people's hands, and now actually really start to make a change, like that's amazing. I think when we chatted the last time as well, we were at the point where we were building the technology and hoping that at some point it'll get there and it'll start to do these things, and we knew it could, but we were just hoping we can get to that point as well.
Yeah.
And now to see that in people's hands and to see the insights that we're generating and to see the excitement, like that team that I presented that data to yesterday, like they were so excited. Like they've spent 5 years collecting data and being really frustrated with like not understanding what it means, and to hear them even talk about how exciting it was for them to be able to now start taking that data and turn it into decisions, like they're the proof points that get us really excited as a company.
And so you're selling them the technology?
Exactly.
That sits on the stuff that they're already gathering?
Yeah, so we basically come in as like the layer that sits on top of all of that. So they generally still collect all of the data. We ingest most of that or all of that. We simplify their processes and automate a lot of their processes, essentially make life easier for them. And then we just help them to say, okay, these are the things that we make decisions off. And now they can spend more time with their coaches, because the whole idea of sports science as well is not that we turn into these like computer nerds that sit in a room and don't talk with our athletes. The whole concept is that we spend more time with our athletes, but the time we spend with them is incredibly efficient. Yeah.
Which actually speaks to your own background. So if people are unaware, you were part of the Leinster physio team.
Yeah, so I kind of sat between the physio and the strength and conditioning team, so I was a bridge between both of them. I was there from around 2007-8 all the way through until 2014-15, so through quite a successful period, and it was an amazing journey there as well. And I think I owe probably the success that we've had to date to them, because the things that we've done and the journey that I've been on wouldn't have happened without being involved in an environment like that. Like I listened to the podcast last week from the Roadshow, and I heard like Jeno and Draco and a few of the boys at Lukey talking about like the journey that Leinster came through, and you heard about like the cultural shift that occurred at Leinster. That's why all this stuff happened as well.
Yeah.
Because the standards, like Shane Jennings talked about last week about how he was humbled by the fact that people said he was part of like the cultural journey, but he really wasn't. He absolutely was. Like, people like that created that environment. They didn't take second best. They would never accept second best. Like, the standards were so high within that environment, and people like Jenna weren't always the most pleasant people to work with because of that, you know, because they were harsh. But like, that's what was needed. Like, that's why he was great. Because he created that, and like, whilst people may not have liked him when he would call them out, they absolutely respected him. And for us, like, the journey that we came through, that all occurred because everybody was asking for more, and everybody wanted to be better, and the competition within that change room at that point in time, and it sounds like it's exactly the same right now.
Yeah.
It was fierce because everybody wanted to pull that jersey on at the weekend. Everybody wanted to get out there, and essentially that's what you need. Like, that's what success looks like. It's not individuals, it's everybody, and everybody like moving in the same direction.
Yeah, so you've got an office here in Dublin. That's where the company starts, obviously, in Dublin, from Leinster to Kitman Labs. That's your own. Now, obviously, you've got offices, I guess, all over the world.
Yeah, so we have 35 staff, I think, or maybe a little bit more in Dublin now. We have about 10 in the US, and we have actually we have 2 now down in Australia. So we have 3 different offices covering all 3 different time zones. But we need it just because we have a lot of North American clients, we have a huge amount of European clients now, and then we also have like a lot of Australasian clients. Like, we signed a league-wide deal down in Australia maybe 2 months ago. We have a huge number of clients there. We have some clients in New Zealand, some clients in Japan, and that's continuing to grow. So it's amazing again to see like the evolution of that, and the fact that now we are a real global company. But it's also very challenging from a time perspective. So I think I've aged about 10 years over the last 2 years trying to manage like offices that run 24 hours, because they're, you know, we cover each different time zone. So basically it's just never stopping, which means like the amount of communication and contact required is pretty huge.
Yeah, no doubt. But it's like, you know, it's obviously one of those challenges with quick growth, is that you've got to manage that. It's clearly going quite well if the NFL teams and the Major League Baseball teams are all starting to pay attention. The next surge is when they all decide that they have to have it, and you have to be ready for that as well.
Exactly, like the growth is really fast. I think the first quarter of this year, first 3 months of this year, we added more teams than we'd I think added in like 10 months the year before. Like, that was challenging for us. It was great. Like, they're not complaints. Like, we had the biggest quarter we've ever had, but being able to then service that and being able to get like the right bodies. It's not just about getting people. Like, we hire professionals that have actually worked in professional sport. We don't hire graduates who just come out of university. We want people who have lived it and breathed it like I have, who actually understand the problems and challenges these teams face, so they can provide like first-class service. And that's really hard, like finding the right people. Actually, over the last 2 weeks, we just hired a guy in Australia who's been here for the last 2 weeks. He used to work with Tigers, used to work with Quins, used to work with the Waratahs. And like, world-class people like that, finding them is a challenge. But it's also amazing because the respect that we're getting from our clients because of the talent that we're bringing in and the skill set that we bring. And our internal motto has always been like, to be the team behind the team. And you can only do that by having like world leaders within your environment.
And understanding it. And again, I think it's clear, kind of just listening to you, how important that exposure at an early stage to the Leinster environment was. Just one final point, Ireland, not a bad place to be doing this at the moment. There's a bunch of other companies who are also doing it. So the space is growing really quick. I know Orico are not in the same space, but kind of in a related field, and they're also doing quite well at the minute.
Yeah, I think, listen, there's lots of companies here that are doing well, like StatSports are doing great as well. Like, Ireland seems to be a really like a good hotbed for this type of technology. I think that's happening just because we're small over here, we're so passionate about sports, but we have to think globally, because, you know, you can't be successful within the world of sport by just being here based in Ireland. There's 4 professional teams and that's it. So you think about these things in a way bigger way. And I also think like being Irish helps. We're liked in most places that we go. So, you know, walking in the door with an Irish accent is never a bad thing. And then also, I think, you know, because of the work that the Oricos, the StatSports have done over the last number of years, when we walk in, people have this expectation. They know that actually sports science and, like, you know, I think brains and intelligence over here is high. And you know, the kudos that we get from being from here now, and the rapport that's being built by Irish companies is phenomenal globally.
Yeah. So it's not a fluke that you all came out at the same time, or is it just a coincidence that these 3 successful companies in the same field are, like, clearly, I guess you are competing for business at various stages, but I don't know, I guess I'm wondering, is there stuff that the prevailing conditions in Ireland helps?
I don't know. I think like if I think about Stat Sports' journey as well, and I'm just referring to them because I know them obviously a little bit better, and we started working with them at Leinster years ago. I think again they were probably helped by the environment in terms of what was happening in Irish rugby, and that's probably the catalyst for both of us, as being like the starting point for both of us was in that environment. And Irish rugby was going really well at that time. Munster had all the success that they had as an organisation. Ireland were starting to go really well. And all of the other provinces wanted that too, and there was a huge amount of effort being driven towards, like, I won't use the word marginal gains because I don't like that, but actually being smarter and trying to understand how we push forward. I think we were both lucky to be involved in that journey, and that's what's helped us to get to the point that we're at today. And I think, we don't necessarily compete for business with both of those guys, but like in many cases, like we actually go in and do deals together. Like Stat Sports and us actually have like an informal partnership, and we go in and help each other out. They do an amazing job of collecting really, really high quality data of what's happening on the field, and then we do an amazing job of turning that into incredible insights for people.
Maybe that's what the Irish thing is, that there's actually a kind of, we could actually benefit from working together as opposed to trying to slit each other's throats.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I think their products are phenomenal. They've done a really, really great job of backing up what they're doing and validating it through research, and they're building really high quality products. And for us, we want to work with companies like that, because the higher the quality of data we get into the system, the better the outputs that we can actually get and the better insights we can deliver to coaches. So like working with somebody like that is amazing for us, because it's high quality information.
Yeah, well, congratulations. It's great stuff, and best of luck with it. And we look forward to being able to apply it in our daily lives sooner rather than later.
So do I.
Could definitely do with a bit of that.
Awesome.
Stephen, nice to have you in again. Thanks a million.